like I got 3 computers in my brain. One pays attention to work, one pays attention to family, and the third pays attention to fun with Game Up Hard Hydration. It's your favorite seltzer, your favorite sports drink, got together, had a baby, but it's so much better. Dave, tell them why we love Game Up.
Dude, we got 4 great flavors. Let's start off with that. We got fruit punch, we got orange, we got lemon lime, your personal favorite, grape. And guys, it's only 110 calories per can. It's low carb. If that's not enough reason to buy Game Up, buy it because they're our sponsor. Come on.
You're about to hear what we think. We're about to hear what we think. Dave and I have been talking very generally about this because, like good friends, we don't want to talk anything deeper than funny sound bites we pulled out of this and holding all the recording for the fans like we have for 5 years. Dave, let's get into the Mr. McMahon documentary. Just first, overall general thoughts about what you watched.
It's almost like watching 2 different documentaries, honestly, when you look at the first 5 episodes and then that final episode, which I kind of thought might be the case, because then that final episode, if you look at the first 5 episodes, you're almost looking at it like, at least I was, like, how did this guy survive all this stuff? And, you know, some of the stuff was questionable, but he looks almost like the good guy when it comes to like the steroid trial and everything like that, you know? And, you know, he has that rough upbringing. And I think you could almost argue the first 5 episodes paint him in a favorable light, not just the entrepreneur that he is. But what I find is really ironic is when you get to episode 6, and that's one thing I'm going to say, they were funny, to me at least. I'm sure some people didn't find them funny, but they had some very interesting edits in this show. And it's like one of them like was with Bruce Pritchard, who I thought was probably the one that got hurt the most out of this. He's given his opinions on what he saw of the series so far. And he's blatant. He's Bruce that we hear on the podcast. And I thought it sucked. He said, I thought you turned into a gotcha piece. And I didn't think you concentrated on the humanity enough of Vince McMahon. And I disagree, because of those first 5 episodes, I thought, this is about what I've seen out there so far. I don't know why this would make them mad. Well, hold on. Because now we're going to get to it. So Bruce is saying, you know, he's not an asshole. But then literally the next edit we see is 2 days later, the stuff with Janelle Grant comes out. And I was like, man, what a kind of a messed up way to make that edit for Bruce, who is admitting to, you know, this guy basically helped his wife when she had cancer. But that being said, this is also the reality. This is what happened. That was the timeline. And these are some horrible, horrible things that allegedly happened. And also what isn't alleged, those text messages were all very horrible. So,
but let's get back to...
I would say that so far. I know you want to talk, but basically I would say it's like 2 different... You watch the first 5, I got a totally different vibe until we got to 6.
Episode 6 was interesting because that whole Bruce thing does set off a lot of questions. Because when I heard that, I didn't feel it was a gotcha piece in the beginning. I thought it was a pretty good general chronicling of everything that happened. So many different things. He's saying you don't know the real Vince. Vince told us he didn't want to give us the real Vince. Time and time again said, I don't want to share that. I'm not going to share that. But then also complains that nobody knows the real him. I think the real him came out in between things where he said he felt like an outsider, where he said he felt weird. Just little offhand comments that he made that you're like, oh, this is a strange guy that has succeeded himself to a place where he's not going to get corrected or he's going to go unchecked. Right. And then you go blending it into a character that further, you know, kind of you lose the plot there. My main question is, what was the point of this documentary? Was it to get to know Vince? Was it to chronicle the rise of the WWE? I think the best thing that came out of it was this is the first time you got to see Vince talk for any length of time. And you got to hear him talk about a variety of subjects. Some he did well, some didn't come off as well. Oh. You can blame it on editing. I'm sure some of it is editing. Some is just what this guy said. Like when he talks about competition and you know, when he sees you coming at him, he's going to crush you. Paraphrasing, that was the general feeling. He might have even said it worse. But it's like when you think about that in response to this lawsuit, you're seeing things like that. You saw it when he butted his way back into WWE.
Eric Bischoff nailed that, and he's nailed it before on his own podcast too. And Eric's a guy who's had a good relationship with Vince. I know he's calling publicly. You can't defend, you know, stuff that's out there now, but before that, he talked about his work relationship and the respect he had developed for Vince, but he's called him out on it still, despite that, and said that, you know, the WCW, and we didn't raid WWE. We gave talent the option to work for us. We competed with them, which is the same thing Vince did with the territories, where he could, you know, he says, I competed with them. They didn't have the right. But when WCW did it, and they were getting the better of him for a little while, he wasn't too fond about that. He turned it around. But you know what? He turned it around and tried to play the victim. He always talked about billionaire Ted, because that's right. They addressed that too, that he was going at. Ted Turner was coming after him, which you could argue, you know, is maybe a little dishonest. Maybe he's cheating a little bit. But there's a story there where Shane McMahon talks about wrestling with his dad and how he was getting the better of him, and his dad cheated. And he's like, you cheated. And Vince said, yes, sometimes I cheat to win. Sometimes you have to cheat to win. Remember that in business. And, you know, it's like that all kind of goes together. You talked about things, maybe editing, but also things not coming off well. The CTE thing. Like, we talked about this. I'd be remiss if I'll probably talk about this on one of the episodes again. I don't care.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be going through each episode, yes, breaking down how it progressed, trying to remember the greatest sound clip. I mean, who's going to forget? He grabbed my pecker.
He grabbed my pecker. But for me, I have to say the other thing is just his belief that The Undertaker didn't remember the match at WrestleMania 30 because he was so distraught over the streak being ending, rather than having an actual concussion. Despite this fact, this man couldn't remember his name or what fucking day it was. And they went to the hospital, and Vince went to the hospital with him. That blew my mind. Obviously, it's out there. Steve Austin, I'm not a CTE guy. That's incredible. I've always liked Stone Cold, but man, that's a bad take. No offense.
How about seeing Vince undercut Shane when brought with what Shane said during the interview? And it was one of those things where he seemed so dismissive, and you can almost see that weird dynamic there. And Shane comes off so normal too when talking about things.
Talking about doing things with his mom and storyline, and he was always reluctant because his mom is like sacred to him. We don't do that. That's a son. That feels like a son who's protective of his mom. Meanwhile, we got dad who wants to run an angle where he's impregnating his daughter. You know, we've heard it before, but it's just like, this was not a normal family. And Shane is like the most normal one, I feel like, out of a bunch. He's protective of his sister. He's protective of his mom. He loves his family. And he wanted us to take over the business. And now Paul Heyman has a lot of stuff out here. I can't tell if Paul's working at different times. I feel like he is. But
I actually listened to a review podcast last night that cut out the Paul Heyman sound clips. And we'll get to that story, you know, when we get to that episode. But so much. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was put together well. I thought the editing went well, where sometimes something at the start of an episode would relate somewhere later. They hit the high points of Vince's life, you know, in a very general sense. That's why I wanted to do the review episodes, because I don't know how much you know. For instance, episode 1 is about Vince coming up. How much do you know about Vince's dad and Vince's dad's family?
I will leave this with this for those of you who want to check out the standalone episodes we're going to do. As far as episode 1 goes, I'm looking forward to talking about David Letterman, and I'm looking forward to talking about the guy, I don't know if you remember this, but we'll bring it up in that episode, did Vince McMahon when he was looking to expand and he didn't want Bob Backlund, and he was looking for a guy with charisma that wasn't Hulk Hogan, the first guy he mentioned. I thought that was very interesting too, just from a wrestling perspective, who Vince thought maybe would be good to like kind of lead the WWF at that time.
100%. And I'm going to drop some knowledge I have from reading the Ringmaster book that was written by Abraham Josephine Reisman. A very interesting look into the come up of Vince, and very interesting insights into his dad's family outside of Vince, and how everything was perceived, because that was one thing I thought was lacking in this documentary series. Overall, I think we both enjoyed it. I have a couple non-wrestling fans at work, or people that aren't as familiar with wrestling, that want to check this out. So I'm interested in hearing what they think. But I am most interested, we're all fueled up with Game Up Hard Hydration.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store.